The forthcoming 19 trillion USD tokenization onto the XRP ledger will be fully facilitated by the XRP ledger and XRP itself. All of this has, of course, been confirmed by numerous sources, and Ripple is monitoring the massive rise in tokenization by businesses on the XRP platform. Not to mention that this will lead to one of the biggest supply shocks in monetary introductions into the XRP ledger in history. However, by then 2030, institutional grade custody will have grown to 19 trillion. That figure might increase to 650 trillion. This is the subject of debate, which clarifies why it has been projected that the price of XRP will rise above 3 by 2026 first quarter and over 35,000 by 2030. Many central institutions like Singapore, which introduced Singapore gold-backed and has decided to integrate XRP into a gold-backed system to facilitate gold transactions using XRP and the XRP ledger, have suggested that XRP might even be backed by gold. But that's a whole other subject, a whole other industry with a market worth in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Right now, our focus is on real estate, real global markets for assets and tokenization, which have the potential to grow to 650 trillion or more. But again, we must look at what happened in the last several days. In fact, there have been several instances of X price issues brought on by the introduction of trillions and hundreds of billions of dollars. Some people think that rather than being price problems, they are short-term test runs when massive quantities of money move in a matter of seconds, causing the price to suddenly spike and retrace. XRP similar to what had happened to Gemini at the time of its listing. They almost immediately shot up to 50 after they listened. In actuality, XRP was being bought and sold at that 50 amount. In the end, they stopped all transactions, barred all orders, and released a statement claiming that, yes, there was a shortage of supplies rather than a pricing error. There was a shortage of XRP due to the tremendous demand, which led the price to soar to $50 in trades. This is now flew thousand if we examine XRP in the long run. In fact, XRP has been increased over the past day. It now has 644 billion, a roughly 23% rise in volume, given that 19 trillion will be implemented within the next year or two, and that X rise to it is understandable that the charts would perfectly match that momentum. With thousands of dollars by the first quarter of 2026, which is only a few months away, the charts are genuinely on the verge of a huge breakdown and look amazing. But let's take a closer look at all of this stuff. We have a demonstration for you now. For XRP, the 35,000 figure is no longer startling. In fact, the probability is greater than we ever thought. Here's an example. These guys have risk management teams that focus exclusively on it, said the director of one of the largest and most global venture capital firms. However, the director of Ville Capital publicly expressed their belief that XRP may become the world's bridge currency and have a value between 10,000 and 35,000 if regulatory protections are put in place. It is impossible to ignore the fact that Ripple CEO Brad Carling has publicly declared that XRP is the only digital asset capable of resolving a multi-trillion-dollar issue on the scale of a global payments crisis, potentially enabling trillions of dollars daily, if not hundreds of trillions. Indeed, according to ARX, one of the largest payment processors and hedge funds, XRP will facilitate more than 30 out of 50 trillion in transactions on the XRP ledger over the course of the next 2 years. Again, officials are publicly discussing the size of these groups. As you know, we will trade between 30 and 50 trillion XRP during the next 2 years. But how can that ever be possible? In the end, XRP is the most widely used cryptocurrency in America, and businesses, banks, and government officials are now entering into contracts to unlock trillions of dollars, just trillions of dollars, into the U.S. economy and American cryptocurrency, specifically XRP. But ultimately, it comes down to businesses growing on the XRP ledger and creating a new market that hundreds of trillions of dollars. RealFi's posture to unleash a vast 654.39 trillion global real estate market during XRP ledger will surely result in a significant supply shock for XRP, and more specifically, the real token that they use for transactions built on the XRP ledger. The XRP ledger now relies on the real token. In fact, it is the most valuable real-world asset token on the XRP ledger. It is the most prominent DeFi project on the XRP ledger. It is also the best real estate project, the XRPPL. The XRP ledger is being used to facilitate this cryptocurrency. That being said, you probably don't know them. After all, they aren't listed on a single centralized exchange. Despite the absence of a broad marketing campaign, they are soaring because they are actually addressing a multi-trading dollar need. Additionally, the extent of the problem they are settling. This is really helpful in bolstering massive increase from 1/100th of a penny to, I think, 3 cents. I'll show you guys how it's altered, and we'll talk about it in greater detail shortly. But it's important to announce the time has come to increase the real token's accessibility. The RealFi ecosystem's official reward token is fully based on the XRP ledger. The company that is utilizing the real token and building on the XRP ledger, RealFi, has declared that it has begun discussions with many leading blockchains. Furthermore, to want to manage some among the largest exchanges. If the actual token is listed on a centralized exchange, this will soar into the thousands. Since only 1% of the 650 trillion market would invest in re-tokens, a very small supply of about 22 million Phase 1 supplies, it should not be surprising that XRP Queen, one of the most prominent and well-known figures in the cryptocurrency industry, publicly said this would be inconsequential. However, if only 1% of the 50 trillion is invested in actual token will rise to 65,000. It's crazy. However, you must look into it and carry out the required research. Take this, for instance. The genuine token has received the top ranking together with XRP, XC, and XLM. The score is perfect. Please have a look at this. All three of the top holders are at low risk. The bank and KIC scores are both 100%. although there are 3491 wallets in total. This project is very young and challenging to change centrally because it is older than 2 or 3 months. But the growth and the expansion are both absurd. It's exponential because, once again, people perceive potential. It's a genuine endeavor to solve a multi-trillion-dollar issue. Century exchanges are unrelated to this. This is purely utilitarian, This is causing the volume to increase. As a result, the price action is soaring. Because there isn't enough supply to go around, institution needed to really facilitate transactions in real-world assets. This is a massive issue. It is up 10% and mostly based on the XRP ledger. Furthermore, there is very little resistance and a high degree of support. This is a huge issue, guys. It will never drop to this level again. It is currently trading at about 3 cents. If you're looking for anything that can address a multi-trillion-dollar problem, the Us.Thankx token is where the real utility lies. Additionally, the equipment has a lot of promise since once it is launched on the market, its price will soar platforms that are centralized. These have increased by at least 50 baht in 6 tier.